Hey, Friendo, Steve here.
Hey, Larson.
And welcome back to Going In Raw Count-Out. It's the top 10 show in podcast form. And today, given that we are, I know there's a stop at Elimination Chamber coming up very shortly next weekend, but it's the entire thing is the road to WrestleMania. And in fact,
doing this because I'm waiting for you to say road to WrestleMania that we're going on it.
We got to point to a sign at some point then, man. Anyways, so we're on the road to WrestleMania. And so we're going to take a look at the 10 best WrestleMania main event builds throughout history. Yeah. And, there's actually been quite a few pretty decent WrestleMania builds when it comes to the main event. But of course, these are main events here. So these are actual matches that finished off the particular card. Sadly, Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigelow is not on this. It's not on this list. We do have another list coming up next week, though.
We do. I actually thought Lawrence Taylor did pretty well in the wrestling ring.
Oh, I did too, and I'm sure maybe the build was good there. I don't know, but
WrestleMania 11 is not terribly memorable.
It's not really, no. But next week we're going to do the worst WrestleMania builds, so that should be a lot of fun as well. And we got some honorable mentions here on this list. But this is a really fun, when we were researching this, it was a really fun trip down not just memory lane, but research lane. I like researching stuff, revisiting old promos and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's fun seeing some stuff that I hadn't seen in a while, or maybe some instances of stuff I don't remember seeing at all. And
we might have discovered a new top musical montage.
Oh, this is a new discovery for me. I remember we were in the office.
Oh, really?
And I watched
okay.
This one.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is the best one.
I don't remember this at all, but I saw it and I was like, wow, this is really good.
It's so good.
We'll get to that.
Back when we were still in the office.
We'll get to that.
Someone in chat brought it up. Said, like everybody talks about My Way. You should watch this one.
Yeah, it's really, really good. So we'll talk about that here in a second. Of course, we want to remind you guys, friendoshop.com. I know it's on Count. I need to change the layout here for Count because it says Friendo merch still. Friendoshop.com. Use code Rumble. Get your percentage off merchandise. We got some new stuff. And then, of course, patreon.com/Stephen Larson. And channel memberships. You get a whole bunch of stuff. You get to do the predictions challenge and all that kind of stuff. Bonus episodes, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Let's dive into it, Larson. Number 10. Hulk Hogan versus Ultimate Warrior.
And I watched one of the promos that Warrior did in the build up to this, and I couldn't understand. Like, I understood the words coming out of his mouth barely, but it didn't make any sense.
He was pretty talking much about speaking English. Yeah,
Hogan going into the cockpit of something and doing something.
Yeah,
I couldn't make heads or tails of it.
Yeah,
at all.
That being said, these were like the two biggest. This is a fascinating study of like the two biggest names in pro wrestling at the time. A potential torch passing situation that they really did try their damnedest to pass that torch. It just, what was kind of crazy leading up to this for years was just how popular, like Warrior, it's not like he had just shown up in the previous 6 months. Like this was like a good 3 year or so build for the Warrior getting to this point. And then as soon as he won it, it like fizzled out.
Yeah.
Like almost immediately.
Yeah. By the time the next SummerSlam rolled around.
Yeah. And all they really had to do in this build is very simple, build this one. And it was just have them interact a little bit and like tease, because like, so leading up to this, Ultimate Warrior feuded with Rick Rude and then Andre the Giant. And of course, Andre the Giant kind of, the gatekeeper to the main event, to the world title in this case. Ultimate Warrior did the thing that you got to do if you want to be champion, body slam Andre the Giant.
Yes.
And he was able to accomplish that. And it was clear the crowd was really into this. And then they just, after Survivor Series, I think when he body slammed, or around that time when he body slammed Andre the Giant, they were like, okay, Jack Tunney just did a video and he said, hey, guess what? This is happening now.
There was actually, so apparently in the 90 Rumble,
there was a moment,
where Hogan and Warrior cleared the ring.
Mm-hmm.
It was just them, and they kind of circle each other.
Right.
Went at it a little bit, double clothesline. And the next person came in, and that was like the first time in ring, I think, where there was really a face-off, a 1-to-1 betwing the two of them. And there was a couple other instances where Hogan would go and make the save, and Warrior would be upset about it, and the tables would turn, and Warrior would save Hogan. But yeah, then it was Hogan who issued the ultimate challenge.
Mm-hmm.
because he wanted to know whether the power of Hulkamania or the power of the Warrior was the strongest force in the World Wrestling Federation.
Well, in the universe. He says that. Like, during the contract signing, he specifies what's the most powerful force in the universe. Not, dark energy or gravity or, the supermassive black holes. Hulkamania or Ultimate Warriorism.
What you said were probably more close to the actual answer than what Hogan or Warrior said, though.
Not one night in Toronto, because the Ultimate Warrior went out. But did you watch they also had a contract signing between these two. That was a very interesting bit of filmmaking. I'll be honest, the more we talk about this one, this could be on either list. But
it really could. It really could. I mean, because going back and revisiting a lot of these, especially in the 80s and early 90s, mostly the 80s, it reminds me that for a time, Vince McMahon, from a creative standpoint, had a plan and would follow it through.
Right, yeah.
You look at the Hogan Andre build, more on that later. Hogan Macho Man, more on that later. These are stories that took months, or in the case of Hogan and Macho Man, almost a year and a half.
Yeah, right.
To see it through till the end. And like, I'm so used to the Vince of the 2000s. The 2010s, where he would get impatient and change his mind.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot of these. It's easy to poke fun at the Hogan Warrior one for the motivation being so kind of silly and simple, because it is simple. It's pretty much who's the strongest presence in the wrestling world, Hogan or Warrior.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
That's not really silly though. It's silly because of who it is.
It's
I know
silly,
what you mean.
It's silly how they phrase it. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And like the contract signing, they got the contract signing going where Hogan says his piece, and Hogan, he just wants to know for his own, a peace of mind. Hey, is Hulkamania still the most powerful?
He's testing himself, brother.
Right. Exactly. And then Warrior in his leather jacket and ponytail says a bunch of stuff, but then they shoot like head on, like they go like we are the Warrior, and Hogan is looking directly at us.
Yeah.
It's a POV shot for each one, and Hogan says his spiel, and then Warrior, of course, says his absolute nonsense. But it's all very compelling stuff, especially in the context of when it was. This was a big deal. I mean, Hogan Andre was a big deal, but this was. These guys are active now. One guy has a title. The other guy has a title. One guy's undefeated. The other guy's basically undefeated. Oh man, let's see how this plays out. And simple was the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, it was wise not to overcomplicate it. We had seen in feuds past where Hogan had been betrayed by his friends, and to generally really good effect. You didn't need to go that well again. Yeah, keep it simple. But yeah, as you said, this is something that could easily be here because it's pretty monumental. The first time you had title versus title, the main event at WrestleMania, you had arguably the two most popular wrestlers in the United States going head to head, and you had the passing of the torch potentially, and you have Hogan testing himself whether Hulkamania is still the most popular thing in wrestling.
And here's the thing about Hogan. Sometimes you'd think that he would have learned the lesson. Sometimes it's okay to step back and lose because within 6 months, like we said, what happened? He was kind of proven out, like the people, they wanted him to take on the evil Sergeant Slaughter, the turncoat.
Yes. So here's another thing, though. A lot of these Hogan feuds, they're feuds because he's no one to get out of the way.
Yeah.
That's a common theme. Hulk Hogan was always a heel.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You got to make that Wrestle Farts video.
It's going to happen someday, maybe.
Let's move on. Number 9.
9.
John Cena versus The Rock, second time in a lifetime.
No, this
match.
is the first. This is once in a lifetime. This is
once in a lifetime. John Cena versus The Miz was Mania 27. This was 28.
Yeah. This is the first feud. The second feud I didn't really care about, but this one was all right. Of course, the whole main event of WrestleMania 27 existed to promote this feud.
That's true.
It wasn't there really to build up The Miz. He lost the title next pay-per-view to John Cena.
Yeah, true.
This is all to tell the story of Cena and The Rock heading into the next WrestleMania. And it's the fact that you have one of the two most popular wrestlers, definitely the Attitude Era, maybe for sure one of the 3 most popular wrestlers ever.
Yeah, sure.
With The Rock. And you had the top star of his era, John Cena, going head to head. I mean, that itself sells WrestleMania. And if it was simply a once in a lifetime, they had the match done, cool. It didn't need the title like it did the second time. Or if they did, I guess you could make the case that CM Punk should have been there.
He probably should have been in there.
Anyways, this feud actually was fairly solid because there was a lot of really good promo back and forth with Cena and The Rock, and especially one in February of 2012. John Cena did what I thought was the impossible. He gave The Rock cry face.
And he did it with such ease. That's what was disarming about it, was all he saw was that, because that was the one where Rock had his notes written down on his arm.
Yep.
And Cena looks down, and he has that look on his face where he absolutely understands that he has this dude.
He can't wait.
He's got this guy dead to rights.
But he doesn't go right for it. He builds to it.
No, he does. He does. And the genesis of this too a little bit wasn't there like some stuff that preceded this that indicated these guys actually don't like each other? This isn't just they're going to come and do a pro wrestling angle. Yeah. Like Cena had talked some shit about The Rock, and The Rock had talked some shit, and it was kind of been on the passive aggressive side. They're on they're on like radio doing this kind of stuff, and they would just talk a little bit of shit. And so when Rock would bust out the Fruity Pebbles stuff, it was like, oh, this isn't like real. Like he's doing this to try to really get under his skin. He's really trying to downplay John Cena. Even a year later, because I just did like a little Wrestle Juice video about because we're at the 10-year anniversary of the title that came after John Cena's, the first one that's the template for the modern era, but it had the scratch logo. And The Rock debuted that one because he didn't like the spinner title. But even when he debuted it, even because that was like heading into their second match, he was like being really snarky about Cena's, spinner title, and so there was that element of like, these guys really don't like each other very much. And you have to wonder, okay, well, what's going on behind the scenes? Are they going to shoot on each other in terms of verbally? And it's seemingly with that promo that Cena did with the writing on Rock's arm, he went there and Rock didn't know that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And that was cool. That was like, oh, dude, he did that. Wow.
Yeah. That made for some great TV. And there was a lot of segments back and forth where, a lot of times, fairly often, they would, say, all right, you guys get 20 minutes. And it was a bit much sometimes. But when they were to the point and like when they were hurling insults and they were pointed and they had direction and a point to them.
Yeah.
When they had their promo offs, it was generally pretty engaging stuff. And,
no, absolutely,
And they got not one but 2 matches out of The Rock during this run. He and Cena teamed up at Survivor Series, and then of course had their match at WrestleMania. Yeah, and did massive box office for the company.
Oh, it was huge, absolutely, yeah. And Rock looked absolutely amazing for both of these. I mean, you sort of understand, this year if it is true that he didn't have the time to properly devote, which number one, you have to appreciate a guy isn't going to come in and lump it up just for the paycheck. Yeah. Rock wants to make sure that he's in ridiculously good shape, probably not just, aesthetically, superficially, whatever, but also cardio wise.
And be able to move like he needs to move in a wrestling ring.
Yeah. But, back then, my God, he was in amazing shape. I mean, it was like the best looking Rock we had ever gotten. And the build was very much must see when these guys got in the ring with each other to talk, because they are arguably the 2 best talkers ever. The case could be made for that. And Cena being so, how do I put this? Stylistically cartoonish with the way he leaves himself open for easy jokes, and Rock took a lot of those easy jokes, and Cena just takes it all. He's Teflon. And so when he was able to say, I don't need to write my shit on my arm or whatever it was he said, and Rock was doing that face. Oh, cry face. It's great. Love the cry face.
Cena is a king of cry face.
Yeah. That was a good one. Let's move on to number 8. Becky Lynch versus Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania 35.
So I will say this. as they're kind of laying the groundwork to this feud at first, I was like, what are they doing? They're making this too complicated. Of course, Becky won the Rumble, and Ronda was Raw Women's Champion. By the time we got to WrestleMania, Charlotte was SmackDown Women's Champ, and they didn't like all the stuff with Becky and her knee being hurt, and she was suspended because she wasn't going to WWE's doctors to get checked out and cleared. It was needlessly complicated. But once they got past all that, and it's like, all right, the match is Charlotte, Becky, Ronda. That's it.
Yeah.
Once it got going in that respect, it was pretty solid. And then on the April 1st Raw, where they had that huge brawl that went all backstage.
Yeah.
That is one of the best pre-WrestleMania brawls I have ever seen. That was so good.
This deserves to be on the list just for that alone. Yeah. When you have Ronda being handcuffed in the cop car, and then she puts her head out and she's yapping away, and Charlotte comes over. She's handcuffed and she gives her a big boot. That alone. I agree with you. I thought that the actual setup to that point was a bit ridiculous. I understand, they were trying to throw some hurdles Becky Lynch's way, and I get that. And I think that wasn't, the intention I thought was pretty solid. It did go a little bit far. I mean, they were in full, let's try to make Becky as much as Stone Cold as possible. And if you remember back in the day, they would throw so much shit Stone Cold's way, as ridiculous as it might have been, because people just want to see him smash through those barriers. And to a degree, I understand why they were doing that with Becky as well.
Yeah, I did too. It's just like the examples of the
the
barriers
specifics,
they threw in a way. They were like, okay,
they were silly. Yeah.
You could do better than this.
And I remember, when we would talk about it back then, it was silly back then. It's still silly. But yeah, no, that backstage bit with the cops and the cars and them just trying to, it was awesome. It was just an absolute delight. And that alone. And, a lot of people complained when Charlotte was added to the match. And I'll be honest with you. At the time I was like, yeah, we probably just do this one-on-one. But number one, Charlotte isn't going to give you a bad match. She's going to add a lot to it from a in-ring standpoint. And I just thought it was kind of interesting just from a heat standpoint, a reaction standpoint. It's like, let's throw this X factor in here. Charlotte's got the credentials, so throw her in there and see what happens. It's kind of interesting how Vince decided to do that.
Yeah, and I guess it also kind of feeds into Becky and Charlotte's feud at the time, where Charlotte would just keep on stealing Becky's spotlight. Going back to the SummerSlam match before all this, where it seemed like, all right, Becky is gonna take on Carmella one-on-one. This is her opportunity to get the title. No, Charlotte gets in the match. She wins. So it's kind of bringing that whole aspect of it full circle.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But yeah, no, like I said, man, this deserves to be on there just for that sequence, the backstage segment.
Oh, it was so good. It was so good.
Let's move on to number 7.
7.
Triple H versus Batista at WrestleMania 21.
Saw that match.
After talking about, I know I was there live. After talking about the last time we did one of these, Randy Orton, and now, getting to this segment here, Evolution really did do wonders for both Orton and Batista. Oh, yeah. It really, really did. I mean, if you look at Batista setting up Orton the way they did to go on to become one of the most successful singles wrestlers of all time through Evolution, and then right after that, because you mentioned here, or it's in the notes here, I think it's at the Royal Rumble where Triple H took on Orton and I think beat him there. Yeah. The same Royal Rumble that Batista then established himself as a star by winning the Royal Rumble. And then you have this conundrum. Who does he face? And Triple H lays out in the now famous thumbs up, thumbs down bit. Triple H lays out a damn good case. Yeah. He really does. Talking about, we can run both brands. We can run this entire place. I think, was it in this promo? Because I know I watched it recently, but I forget. I saw something where he talked about, I forget it was him or HBK and something else, talking about how he was saying it would have been like if, we were running WCW and WWF. Yeah, like back in the day. Yeah, I mean, and then he makes his pitch to Dave, and Dave's got both contracts are on SmackDown one, and he looked at the SmackDown one, gives him the old thumbs up. I'm going to go after JBL, and then he throws it away and puts the Raw one up, and he puts his thumbs down or backwards. He puts the thumbs down and he throws that away, and Triple H starts, freaking out.
Yeah.
And the Nature Boy starts doing this shit, like having a conniption. That thumbs up, thumbs down moment was a star-making moment, and it's rare you get those.
It really is. It really is. And Triple H doing everything to try to convince Batista to go after JBL rather than himself is a fun kind of wrinkle to the story.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you mentioned during that promo, that segment where first you have Bischoff and Teddy Long making their pitches as to why Dave should pick their brand, then you have Triple H making his pitch. It's all really captivating stuff. And you get, after all the pitches are made, Batista gets on the mic, and it's real simple. He says, "I know what I'm gonna do. I've known what I'm gonna do for a long time." And he grabs both contracts. He throws the Raw one down to the mat and holds the SmackDown one, and that's what Triple H. Nature Boy.
Yeah, they're both doing the double thumbs up. Yeah.
And then Dave puts up the thumbs up.
Yeah.
And then really slowly, and the crowd knows exactly what he's doing as soon as that thumb starts going down.
Because his face goes blank.
He gets super serious.
Yeah.
And then he tosses Flair out of the ring, lays into Triple H, power bombs him through the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's someone establishing themselves as a main eventer in the matter. I mean, it's kind of a long segment, like 12 minutes, but by the end of that 12-minute segment, Batista's the guy.
Oh, it's nail biting. It's nail biting. It really is. I remember watching this live because I was watching the show. I was watching back then, probably because I knew I was going to Wrestlemania. But no, I remember watching this and being like, holy shit, like Batista is his own dude. Like you see that take place. And dude, this was the kind of moment that I really wanted for Wardlow back when, because there's some parallels there that I see. And unfortunately, I feel like, they have a long way to go till he's back, or till he's at that point where I would believe, oh, okay, this guy, world champion, this is something that everybody's dying to see now.
Yeah.
But no, this was great. I don't even remember, like, did much happen between that moment? Because, I mean, that's the Rumble, and then we were all the way at WrestleMania.
They milked like a month out of Triple H kind of trying to convince Dave.
Did, that's right. This wasn't right after the Rumble.
No, it was late February where that segment happened. So, they had a month and a half between then and Mania.
Not a lot, yeah.
So, which is great. It's pretty cool when they actually build up some drama to what's the choice going to be?
What's he going to do? Yeah. They try to do that. Cool. They tried to do that when Edge won the Rumble, 2 years ago.
Yeah, he went to NXT. He went everywhere.
He went everywhere trying to make his decision. Yeah, and I like that. It should be a big decision that people make.
Oh yeah.
But especially in this situation where Triple H has the title, and you see this go down. Yeah, no, that was really good stuff.
It was.
Let's move on. Number 6. Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. WrestleMania 3. Probably. I mean, I don't know. WWE would probably classify this as like their biggest WrestleMania match, maybe of all time ever.
Yeah. I mean, it's the match that sold out the Pontiac Silverdome. Got, kayfabe probably 93,000 people in the building.
Yeah.
And it's the image of Hogan slamming Andre is the thing that kicks off WWE's signature to this day.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
For at least in the eyes of the company, this is like the defining moment of WWF, WWE as a national wrestling powerhouse.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, for my money, looking back at, all the Piper Pitt segments, the contract signing, some really good character work from everybody involved. The setup, of course, was Andre had been undefeated for 15 years. Hogan had been world champion for 3 years. They each got trophies.
Guess whose was largest?
Hogan's was the big trophy. So, Larson, would this WrestleMania main event, the seminal moment in history, have been threatened had they simply gotten a bigger trophy for Andre the Giant?
Perhaps. If they had gotten trophies of equal size?
Maybe. Perhaps.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. It's entirely possible, Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Upset with the size of the trophy, Andre the Giant feeling slighted and disrespected, and maybe with a little bit of goading from Bobby the Brain Heenan telling him that Hulk Hogan had been talking shit behind his back. Andre the Giant and Bobby Heenan appeared on the celebration episode of Piper's Pit, where they're going to celebrate Hulk Hogan and his trophy and his 3-year run. And Hogan's like, "Oh, cool, Andre's here. Why are you with that guy? Who is this? Why is he with you? He's bad guy. He only does bad guy stuff." And Andre just sits there silent, and Heenan just goes off on Hogan. "You piece of crap. You talk crap behind his back. He's undefeated for 15 years. You never given him a title shot. And you know, you've only been champion for 3 years, and you have a bigger trophy." And then Hogan's like, "No, Andre, it's all good. Like, you know, you could have just asked me. You could have just asked me. It's okay. What are you doing?" And then Andre like rips off not just Hogan's shirt, but also the crucifix chain of his brother for saying prayers and whatnot. And he just leaves Hogan an emotional disaster.
Yeah.
And then they leave, and Hogan is he's cradling. He's got his shirt, he's got his chain, and Piper, who's a piece of shit, is like actually sympathetic to Hogan. This has rattled everybody. This is such a big moment. And he looks down and he wipes his chest, and he's in the most shoot way possible. "You're bleeding."
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan doesn't bleed.
Mm-mm.
He says, "You're bleeding."
Yeah.
He said, "Come on, let's go." And he has to basically coddle him away, like emotionally.
Yeah.
Be very gentle with the Hulkster.
You know, I don't know if the blood spot with the chain and stuff was planned or not. I'm guessing just one of those happy accidents, but it's like a real stark visual. You know, the immortal Hulk Hogan is very immortal.
Yeah.
Human.
Yeah.
And this is the first time we really see him feel seemingly actual human emotion, you know, on WWE programming. One of the previous segments to set up the bit where Andre is ripping off Hogan's shirt. I think it's the one, the Piper's Pit, where Andre gets his trophy, smaller trophy for his 15-year undefeated streak. And of course, who comes in, put the spotlight on himself? Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's first instance here of
There you
Hogan
go.
dominating the spotlight, because that's what Hogan does, because he's a heel.
Because he's a bad guy.
Always was a heel.
He's a narcissist. But yeah, and then we do the contract signing, where again, you know, Heenan's just talk, and Hogan is he is a mess. He is an absolute. He's jittery, and he's about to, like, you know, bust into tears, maybe, I don't know. And Andre is cold. Just absolutely cold. And sometimes he's got like a half smirk on his face when he knows that Hogan's just breaking. He's just completely breaking. And Heenan just won't stop talking. And he says, "Sign it if you're going to sign it." And so Andre does, and they pass it over to Hogan. And he says, "Man, all you had to do is ask me, brother. But what have you done to all the Hulkamaniacs out there? You've let them down. Not just me, all the Hulkamaniacs." And then Andre says, "You know, I taught you everything." He says, "I didn't teach you everything that I know. I still know a couple tricks in a Mania. You're going to find out the last lesson." Oh, it's good stuff.
It is good stuff. Yeah. Especially for that era of WWE wrestling, this is really good stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Really good stuff.
Let's move on to number 5. The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels at Mania 2010.
I love this story so much. This is one of my favorite stories.
No, this is so good. Yeah.
And it's so simple. It's simple. So it goes back to the previous WrestleMania 25, where Shawn Michaels had a match against The Undertaker. Brilliant bout. And came up short. And when he's accepting his award, his Slammy Award for Match of the Year, Shawn Michaels is like, "I was this close. If I get one more shot, I can beat The Undertaker." And so that's his mission going into WrestleMania season. Because at the time, Undertaker's champion. So what's the easiest way for Shawn Michaels to get a match with The Undertaker? Win the Rumble. He gets eliminated from the Rumble, and his reaction to getting eliminated from the Rumble is heartbreaking.
It stops everything.
Pardon the pun.
Yeah. No, and just, you can keep on going just a second. His actual elimination is like the best elimination ever, because he's on the apron, Batista hits him, and he starts grabbing for the ropes as he's going down. It's so brilliant.
It's so good. It's so good. So he starts trying to find any way he can to get a match with Undertaker at WrestleMania. And he's denied at every turn. Undertaker's like, "No, I'm not going to face you. He already beat you." You know, he goes after refs. And then we go to Elimination Chamber, where Undertaker's defending the World Heavyweight Championship. He sneaks in, costs Undertaker his belt, hit him with Sweet Chin Music. Chris Jericho walks out as World Heavyweight Champ. And so we go to the next night on Raw, Undertaker's like, yeah, I said no before. I accept your challenge, but there's a stipulation. Shawn Michaels loses. He has to retire.
Mm-hmm.
And Michaels is like, all right, that's cool, because if I can't end the streak, no reason I should be here anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Man, we were talking about video packages.
Yeah, man.
Go and watch the video package for this match. It is the absolute best video package maybe WWE has ever put together. You got a cover of Running Up That Hill, the Kate Bush song, that Placebo, their version of it.
Yeah.
And it does such a great job in about, 5.5, 6 minutes of encapsulating everything this story has. It's so good.
Man. His obsession. It's a really brilliant, just a brilliant video package. Like you said, it makes cinema out of this shit. You know, it really does. There's him between, Triple H trying to walk him off the ledge, basically.
Yeah.
Saying, "What are you doing, man? You know, your whole career's, you're going to lose your career." He's like, "I don't have a career." I mean, this is a dude named Mr. Wrestlemania. Yeah. And he can't break the WrestleMania streak. If he can't do that, how can he even live with himself?
I know.
And it ends up getting him in the end. I mean, it's crazy that's how they ended up. It's like some Moby Dick type shit here.
It really is. It really is.
Ends up destroying himself in the process.
It's interesting how all that informs the end of an era match too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dude, this whole long 4-year story.
It's great. Yeah. Yeah. Because then Triple H got 2 shots at the Undertaker. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome stuff. Go watch that video package. I know everybody. We're going to talk about the My Way one for Rock, Stone Cold next, and that's fine and all.
Yeah.
But in terms of like real cinematic video packages, it's hard to top this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there goes my cat. It's old now. Okay, so she's laying. No, she's just scratching. Whatever. Let's move on to the next one.
Well, I'm going to make one more point. At the end of this match, where Shawn Michaels is defiant till the end,
yeah.
He knows he's beat at the end of the match at Mania 26, but still defiant to the very end. Just a master class in wrestling storytelling. This is. It's so good.
I got to go back and watch that match again. Oh,
it's really good. It might be my favorite of the two.
Yeah.
They had.
Yeah.
Everybody really loved 25 and it's great.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The heart of their match at 26 is what really sticks with me.
Yeah, man. Well, we're old. I think it appeals to the No Country for Old Men types,
Could be.
It's like,
that's why we love End of an Era so much.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. Let's go ahead and move on to number 4. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock at WrestleMania 17. Of course, dude. And look, I love this video package. I think it's a terrific video package. Limp Bizkit, My Way or The Highway. The music video itself is cut together to the beat. It's really good. My only qualm. I'm saying I love the video package. I'll watch if I scroll through it, see it on Twitter. I'll watch this shit. My only qualm about it is that there seem to be like not enough footage to really beef this thing up. Like the Shawn Michaels one tells a whole story. This one is a lot of the beer stuff. Yeah, there's a lot, and I know Stone Cold's thing was beer, but him and Rock, that one segment where they did the beer stuff is played ad nauseum in this video package. But the song is custom made for a wrestling feud.
It is, and the energy of that video package is hard to deny.
It really is. Yeah.
So The Rock and Stone Cold had an interview with JR prior to their match at Mania 17, which really encapsulated and laid out their story pretty easily. So a few months prior, Stone Cold had returned from injury, and while he was gone, The Rock became undisputed number 1 babyface in the company. And in Stone Cold's mind, that's his spot. And so he says to The Rock, on a personal level, I don't like you. I need to beat you because of that. But on a professional level, I absolutely must beat you because you're in my spot. And for just about anybody else, that alone would justify the heel turn at Mania 17. But Stone Cold was operating on such a different level of popularity. He's absolutely beloved by the fan base that they just didn't buy it. They didn't buy it for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking back on it, so like I'm not a fan of it. I know you're not a fan of it. I've seen, people on Twitter say, "Oh man, no, this is great" or something. So I think there's a segment of the fan base that likes this turn with Austin. It did. The positive of it is that it did end up giving us some quality comedy stuff from Austin, which was outside his usual wheelhouse. From a business standpoint, you can debate the creative merits of it. I didn't like it. But from a business standpoint, it did seem to harm the WWE quite a bit. Their ratings went down after it. From a business standpoint, it didn't seem like it panned out all that well.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah, match was great though, up until the heel
no,
turn.
the match was absolutely phenomenal. The heel turn was deflating to me. When watching it, I was like, oh, what a crap finish that was. Like Stone Cold, really? Austin? Yeah. That's crazy. I think it would, to me, it would have been preferable if he just simply lost, and just we had to deal with a Stone Cold whose confidence was shook, a No Country for Old Men Stone Cold.
Yeah. Or, like and I was listening to an interview he did. I can't remember where he said, something along the lines of, I should have just called an audible. It's done it as booked, but at the end, instead of shaking Vince's hand, gave him a stunner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Realizing maybe a little the No Country for Old Men that while he was away, a lot of superstars from WWE passed him by. So now he has to cut more corners than he normally would.
Yeah.
Just to stay ahead,
Yeah. No, it'd have been interesting if that would have been interesting. But, it was, what was it? Didn't you say there was an interview where it was revealed that Stone Cold wanted to do this and Vince had said, I owe it to him to give this a shot. JR, that's right. Yeah, I remember you mentioned that the other day. So, interesting stuff. But a hell of a build to this and a hell of a match.
Yep, it was really good.
All right, let's move on. Number 3. Mega powers explode.
It's WrestleMania 5. So it's like they took everything that worked with the Andre and Hogan story and then really turned it up.
3, 4, and 5 was quite a run of WrestleMania main events, weren't they? Because 4 was the when Macho Man won the.
It was the tournament.
Yeah, the tournament, right?
Yeah. So Macho Man. So you go all the way back to 1987. Towards the end, 1987 was the first time that Miss Elizabeth goes backstage, brings Hogan out to help Macho Man when he's being attacked by the Hart Foundation and the Honky Tonk Man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the genesis of the Mega Powers. They didn't actually wrestle a whole lot on TV, more so on the house show circuit.
Yeah.
I think they wrestled at SummerSlam 88
and
maybe a couple other times.
Mm-hmm.
But you had Hogan help Macho Man win the title at WrestleMania 4. And Macho Man then had that title for an entire year. And while he was champion, they told the story of their alliance and that alliance falling apart. Largely due to Macho Man's jealousy.
Oh, yeah. Miss Elizabeth, why are you looking at her like that? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm just gonna do some Macho Man aside.
Macho Man
tell
stuff.
the story.
All right.
Because you were, look, I'll be honest with you were actually, weren't you actively watching this stuff at the time?
Yeah, I was watching a lot of this at the time. Yeah.
Did I ask you the other day? I did ask you. I got to put that in best of. I got to remember.
Whether I was Team Hulkamania or Team Macho Man.
You said you were Team Work Rate.
Yeah, I was.
You wanted a good match.
So I guess by that measure, I was Team Macho Man.
Probably, I would imagine. So.
And so like Hogan accidentally, as Hogan puts it, eliminated Macho Man from the Rumble in '89, and just over that winter and spring, just Hogan would do something and it would irritate Macho Man, and eventually, I think it's the February 2nd episode, the main event, Hogan and Macho Man are taking on the Twin Towers. There's a spot where Macho Man's tossed out of the ring. He lands on Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And Hogan goes and checks on Elizabeth, picks her up, and walks out on Macho Man in the middle of the match.
Yeah.
And Macho Man's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And so eventually Hogan comes back to the ring, looks for a tag. Instead, Savage slaps him in the face and walks out.
Yeah.
And so after Hogan beats the Twin Towers.
Makes sense.
Yeah, he goes backstage. Savage attacks him, says that Hogan's stealing his spotlight.
Yeah.
He's the champ. Macho Man is. Because like apparently at Survivor Series, they co-captained the team. Macho Man did the entrance with the team, and afterwards, guess who had their own entrance?
Hogan. Yeah, he was driven crazy by Hogan's narcissism.
Yes, Hogan was always a heel. And then he accused Hogan of having lust in his eyes for Miss Elizabeth. And so they have this backstage brawl. It's obvious Savage is a heel again. And it leads to their match at WrestleMania 5. And that match itself is weird because it really is a match of two halves. The first half is like a solid Macho Man match, like a good Macho Man match.
Yeah.
Where he's working a fast pace. And then as soon as it flips over to a Hogan style match, kind of gets bogged down.
Yeah.
You know Hogan is going to win. So it kind of, I don't know, it kind of sucks the air out of the building a little bit.
Yeah.
It really is a match of two halves, and it kind of wish whether Macho Man had won or lost, they could have kept the pace up.
Sure.
The Macho Man pace up for the bout, instead of Hulk out, boot.
Doesn't work for me, brother. This isn't New Japan, brother.
Yeah. He's not gonna be. Hogan's not doing any drop toe holds here.
Come on, let's do it. No, I watched a bunch of the stuff from this as well. Obviously, I mean, we've seen it a ton of times over the years, but especially Macho Man's final word, his promo before the match that day. Hogan's is fairly. It's just Hogan. But Macho Man's is extra sweaty. Like, he's just dripping in sweat. And the camera is like right on it. Well, you can look the YouTube version of it. The camera's like right here on it. And he's like, no pukesters to the left, no pukesters to the right. Oh, yeah, because every time I'm in my match, you've got to come out and steal the spotlight. I let you do what you want in your matches, And it really is a guy who's been driven to the brink of madness. It's really terrific stuff.
And we've talked about this for some reason quite a bit recently about how I think both this and the Andre story are similar in that most of the story is told in like 3 or 4 segments.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like the meat of the story. I mean, there was moments throughout the year of 88 and beginning of 89 in the ring where they'd hit some story beats, but most of the more dramatic stuff is just done in segments kind of sprinkled throughout.
Yeah, they would do like Saturday Night's Main Event. They would do some stuff there. They would do it on Primetime Wrestling. But mainly it was like the high profile stuff they would tell these stories on. Yeah. I mean, we're so used to weekly episodic. It's just different. Yeah.
Raw and SmackDown where stories are continually being told week after week after week where, back then they'd hit story beat and they'd go weeks without really touching on something directly. There might be little things happening in the ring, but, as far as doing promos or stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was a lot. You could tell a story that these days would span 3 weeks. Back then would span 4 months. And maybe even longer because these days, you got to book something every week. And I kind of wish that they wouldn't. Raw is so long, and I wish that sometimes they would, like the NXT from a couple of years ago when it was only 1 hour. Things were not happening every single week. They'd recap here and there. They'd say, "Oh, next week we're going to find out more about this." But yeah, back then, I think just because entertainment consumption was so much slower, it was so much more methodical because the options were so much more limited.
Yeah.
That they could tell stories that way. These days, if you're not keeping up on a week-to-week basis, on a twice-a-week basis, then WWE feels like, oh, you're not going to be able to, people are going to get lost.
Well, it's interesting I started listening to the Something to Wrestle With about the birth of Monday Night Raw.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And it is interesting, the motivation beyond trying to save money to do Raw live is to be more topical.
Yeah, right, yeah.
They'd go and shoot stuff in bulk and have stuff in the can for months maybe.
Yeah.
Whether it be up for prime time, whether it be for their syndicated shows, whatever the case may be. And they would just kind of like, or for Coliseum home video, or whatever the situation was. And they would just be tape, and then just cobble it all together later. Seemingly. Shoot, and worry about it later.
Pretty much, yeah.
And it seems like, and I believe Pritchard talked about this, is where they had arenas booked. And so they had to kind of like reconstitute how they booked the shows.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Because now weekly live television, even though not all of them are live, you got to worry about continuity maybe more than you did before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was pretty much a sea change. Although what's interesting about it is that the Raw stuff, and one day I'd like to do a talk with you about Monday Night Raw. It doesn't seem to be winning any of the polls that we do, but it doesn't mean we can't do it.
Yeah, totally.
But no, it is interesting just how different things were told. But I went back and I watched WWF's first televised program, or one of their first televised programs, was just Championship Wrestling. And it was like, from 77 to 81, something like that. And, I believe those were all done basically with the exception, they would sprinkle some in, but it was all one show that they would tape in a place and they put that on TV at some point in the future. And sometimes they'd put little, they'd insert other matches from other shows and whatnot. But, just down at, they'd do interviews there by the ring right after the match happens. And then they went to the other format, to the primetime wrestling type format, where they just throw a bunch of shit in there and they'd have a framing device, whether it was a studio or the talk show or whatever. And then Raw just sort of took the live element. And then, they, like, it used to be sort of one show live. With that was the exception. So they could be so you could talk about the news, apparently, was one of the primary motivators.
I know.
Which was weird. But anyways, that's another conversation for another day. I'm interested in doing that. Let's move on to number 2. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 14.
I mean, a lot of this was just seeing Stone Cold become the guy. There's a lot of anticipation there. And then also you put Mike Tyson into that situation, and you get a lot of mainstream eyeballs on your product when your product's already on the upswing.
Yeah.
And you got a wrestler in Stone Cold who's really captured the fans' imagination and is ready to achieve heights in the world of professional wrestling that maybe no one else has ever seen.
Yeah.
And it really is a recipe for real intriguing build, even though Shawn Michaels was not in the best of shape. He was hurt.
Yeah.
Seemed like mentally, he just was not in really the best of shape after hurting his back at the Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
In a casket match against The Undertaker. And so, I mean, I guess credit to the creative team for trying to finding ways to make this interesting, especially with Mike Tyson's involvement. Where is his allegiance? Of course, before the match, he had the DX shirt on.
Yeah.
He was out there crotch chopping with HBK and Triple H. And we're like,
I've
okay,
never seen Mike Tyson happier than when he was revealed to be a member of DX.
Yeah.
I watched that just before this, and he was so happy to cross chop.
Yeah. So right there, you got the odds stacked against Stone Cold.
Yeah.
Because if Stone Cold gets out of line, you got the special enforcer Mike Tyson there.
Yeah.
To get Stone Cold back in line.
I thought what made this for me, why it's so high on the list, personally speaking, was to see the efforts of the WWF and trying to pivot in a majorly different way. I mean, if you look at how different WWF was from, let's say, 95 to 96, 97, when they really entered in the Attitude Era, my God, it is a different, it is a sea change. It absolutely is. And to see that gamble pay off, going back to the creation of Raw episode, what was the original concept of Raw? Gritty, uncut, uncooked, dirty, uncensored, all that stuff. Well, that's what the Attitude Era eventually became. It wasn't that in 93 when they started Raw.
No.
But it got there. The idea was there, and they finally executed it because Vince McMahon realized whether it's, oh man, what Heyman's doing is really cool over there, or whatever the case be, modernizing it to keep up with, the grunge element, I guess, was sort of one idea, to make it feel more dangerous. Tyson's presence and the danger that when you have Stone Cold in there, a man alone, Tyson and his entourage, WWE official, I'm talking about when they did the big segment that landed on ESPN and everything, that big segment was the culmination of all that effort, of all that work. And to see that come together really is a beautiful thing. It's like, man, all that stuff, the gamble that the risk that you took on your product, feeling out, like going by your instinct, looking at what Heyman's doing, be like, man, a lot of this stuff could really work for our product. And looking at Stone Cold and being like, this guy, we can roll with him. DX was insanely popular, even though you're right, HBK was burnt out at that point. But you have all these elements in play, and it really made for interesting stuff, for really like must-see stuff.
It really did. It really did. Yeah. It was from the moment Stone Cold won the Rumble, given the circumstances of Shawn Michaels being hurt, so much of this was kind of booked. I won't say to perfection, but near perfection in terms of building up anticipation for this match. And, everybody seemingly except maybe Shawn Michaels was there waiting to see Stone Cold win that belt and begin, Stone Cold era.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I remember watching this when it was going down and being like, man, this is great stuff.
Yeah.
It's way more interesting than what's going on in WCW right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, it is interesting to see somebody be made. That's, you know, we talked about a little bit with Batista. It's fascinating to see somebody just be made, and you get that sense in the crowd where it's like, man, this is the guy now.
Yeah.
This is the guy that people are tuning in to see.
Yeah, when WrestleMania is at its best in the main event, you get that coronation moment, you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a really special thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it is also interesting to see, because DX was so popular at the time. It didn't feel like, and again, you know, I remember watching at the time, but I was not, that was like when I first started watching WWF. You know, I was watching WCW for a little bit before this, but you know, that's when I first started watching WWF. So I didn't fully comprehend at the time that what DX was and how popular they were. Cause I think 14 was like the first WWF thing that I actually watched.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I had not watched the Rumble at that point. I was watching everything WCW, and then something about this and Tyson. I was like, okay, well, I got to check this one out. I forget. I don't know. I probably watched it at one of your guys' houses or something.
It was the Montreal Screwjob that got me back into WWF.
Yeah,
I heard that happen. I was like, oh wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, that is nuts. Yeah, if that was on my radar at the time, I probably would have been like, oh, cool. Because I didn't even know, I did not know who Bret Hart was at the time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I was brand new to it. Like in '97, I didn't start watching until, I don't know, late '96, I guess.
Yeah.
Although
that
I think
sounds about right.
Probably would have been, because I mean, I graduated, I started hanging out with you guys.
Yeah.
But maybe that timeline's even a little bit off. Maybe I didn't really start hanging out with you guys until.
Well, I got to credit Hilton with getting me back in, because he's the one that says, hey, if you checked out this NWO stuff? I'm like, what? What's that?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
This is all this all that we're doing, I guess.
Credit
to Hilton for all this.
Sounds right. Sounds about right. Let's not think about that and talk about number one. Daniel Bryan versus Batista versus Randy Orton at WrestleMania 30. Oh boy, man, oh man.
You know, they kind of whether their goal, the end game for this was Daniel Bryan winning the championships at Mania 30 or not. They got there eventually. You know, it goes all the way back. I remember this clear as day where John Cena has to select his opponent for SummerSlam. And he says, I want to wrestle Daniel Bryan. Everybody get out of the way so we could step forward.
Yeah.
God, that was so good. It was so good.
Well, you can go back, and I forget when this particular moment was, but at one point they were in Seattle, and Triple H and a bunch of the roster were in the ring, and Triple H was trying to speak, and the crowd just would drown him out with Daniel Bryan's. And the camera cuts to Daniel Bryan. He has like the most he's got such a big goofy smile on his face. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm not gonna say day one, but from a certain point, I guess from the Team Hell No stuff, maybe the crowd just absolutely embraced Daniel Bryan, and they would not take anything that wasn't him. And you can look at the Royal Rumble 2014 for the clearest evidence of this. And how pissed off they were when Batista came out late for the number 30 spot.
It was Rey Mysterio was number 30.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mysterio was number 30. That's right. Yeah. And it got down to Batista and Roman Reigns, and the crowd was still chanting Daniel Bryan, and they realized, well, we're not going to get him, so we're just going to chant for Roman Reigns. Yeah. But, you know, if you go back to SummerSlam prior to this WrestleMania, that's when Daniel Bryan had his match against Cena, I think. Yeah, Cena, because you mentioned that. And he wins, and the crowd just erupts, and Orton comes down.
And Triple H was the guest ref. He pedigrees Daniel Bryan right after he wins, and then Orton cashes in, yeah.
And so to tell that story from SummerSlam all the way to Mania, and I know at Mania they wanted something else, and so this is just how it ended up playing out. So you don't really credit Vince for this necessarily. I guess you credit him for not being a complete fool. But if you go all the way back to that SummerSlam, and you could probably find stuff before then, and then go all the way up to WrestleMania, and you're sitting here thinking, are they really going to? Because Daniel Bryan at Mania had to fight what, Triple H first,
Triple H and then the show,
Yeah, and then it's like, oh my God, they're really going to do this thing, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they did the thing. But, you have the moment where all the fans are in the ring, and it's the yes movement, which is a little on the corny side, but it works because Daniel Bryan is fine being corny. Maybe not Bryan Danielson, but Daniel Bryan is fine being a little bit on the corny side because
he understands that wrestling is to a degree inherently ridiculous. Yes.
Right, yeah. And you see, like, the power of what the fans can really do. And that was one instance where, man, oh man, they came through and they got what they wanted.
They did. And somehow, and all the obstacles they put in Daniel Bryan's way, and I'm not just talking about what is on TV, seemingly even backstage, fed into his underdog story. He beat Cena for the title at SummerSlam. Orton cashed in on him, got the title, and throughout that fall, they were feuding for that belt. And every show, almost to a frustrating degree, they would find a way to cost Daniel Bryan the title. And ultimately, Orton unifies both the belts against Cena. And, the main event they had in mind seemingly was Orton and Batista at WrestleMania. And then I forgot about this detail, so I was doing research on this. So during the Occupy Raw segment where they had all the fans in the ring, where Daniel Bryan's like, I want a match against you, Triple H, at WrestleMania. And he gets that, and he's like, okay, well, how about this? If I beat you, I get put in the main event. And, of course, he just frustrated Triple H so much that Triple H agrees. But I forgot about this detail. That later on, Triple H said, well, if I beat Daniel Bryan, I get put into the main event.
Oh, huh. Oh, you think that option was probably on the table at one point?
Oh, I mean, not seriously, no. But I think they were just trying to put that there to put some doubt in the fans' minds, maybe that it was a certainty that Daniel Bryan was going to win in advance, It gave Triple H something more to fight for, essentially,
Could you imagine how torpedoed that WrestleMania would have been if at the beginning of it, Triple H wins and moves on to the main event? And everybody's waiting around for Daniel. Is he going to show up at any point?
Yeah, I know. In any other year, Triple H versus Batista versus Randy Orton, that's recipe for potentially good story.
It's like a Shield triple threat. Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah, but not at WrestleMania 30. Daniel Bryan had a main event, and he had to win those titles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Had to.
Yeah. A couple honorable mentions. This wasn't the main event. This is matches for main events. We already talked about 35, but you got to kind of mention Kofi Mania. I know it wasn't a main event, but it's similar to the Daniel Bryan stuff. It was like, no, this is happening. You're going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bummer that actually wasn't the main event because it was probably the best match on that card. I think.
Yeah,
it was really good. Was that 35?
It was 35. Remember,
that's right.
Yeah, because Seth versus Brock opened that
the match that main evented should have main evented, I guess. But either of those were deserving of being main event.
If they had a night 1, night 2 situation.
Yeah, exactly. Then definitely
great.
You have Kofi Mania. You have Kofi beating Daniel Bryan, the planet's champion Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, that
night
was
1
killer Daniel Bryan.
Gosh, might be my favorite Daniel Bryan. And then you have Becky and Charlotte and Ronda main event night 2. Let's talk. Speaking of 2-day WrestleManias, Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair at Mania 37.
Yeah.
Talk about coronations.
Yeah, that was a great one.
When Bianca was established as a massive star in WWE.
Yeah.
Fantastic bout.
Yeah.
Build to that was really, really good.
One of the entries that was on here and we took it off to make room for Warrior Hogan was Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart, WrestleMania 12, 1996. It's very simple, and there's elements of it that are, and I understand that like they had a real life rivalry, but they also had a real life respect. And all of that played out in a very almost documentary way in this build. They did like some really phenomenal little mini short documentary type things on the road to, Shawn Michaels' childhood dream that was very different and very refreshing. It was almost like an ESPN approach to telling the story. And of course, Shawn Michaels had his mentor, Jose Lothario. And yeah, the docu bits that they had were, especially on Shawn Michaels' part, he was just speaking like he's a regular person.
Yeah.
And Bret was a bit more, this was Shawn Michaels' childhood dream, so Bret had to be kind of the spoiler. He was trying to play the spoiler, basically, which is a bit of a bad guy.
Well, he kind of took a bit of similar to Stone Cold's motivation going to Mania 17, whereas
right, yeah,
this is my spot. You have what it takes to take it from me.
Yeah, because he mentioned,
I'd like to see you try. Yeah,
he mentioned I felt that way with Randy Savage.
Yeah,
I was knocking on his door, and eventually I passed him up. Well, Shawn Michaels knocking up mine. I'm not ready yet.
Yeah.
And it was just very, I don't know, it felt more like an actual sporting event than like a pro wrestling storyline. I kind of regret that it's not at number 10, but you got to put Warrior Hogan on there, baby.
Yeah. I mean, the Brett Shawn Michaels build wasn't as
flashy.
Yeah. Showy as, you know, the spectacle of Warrior and Hogan.
Sure.
You know, it was grounded ultimately on who's the best wrestler.
Yeah.
You know,
not who has the most power in the universe.
Yeah, not what's the most powerful force in the universe. It's just who's the best wrestler, and so it's just not as showy as
such pedestrian things.
Who's best wrestler as opposed to the strongest force in the universe.
Yeah, it was a very strongly considered though.
Also, I remember Kurt Angle versus Brock being a pretty solid build. I could be wrong. But it's been a while since I watched that. But it was like babyface Brock Lesnar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doing his thing. I remember that being pretty solid.
That was probably pretty good, yeah. I'm sure probably the WrestleMania 20 main event was probably a good build.
Oh, yeah.
If you guys want to sit here and talk about that guy all day long, and then we'll get crapped on in the comments for it.
Yes.
Oh, man. Anyways, that's going to do it for this episode of Count Out. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate it. Next week, we're going to be back with the worst WrestleMania builds in history. This should be a really fun one to do. Till next time, we'll talk to you later.
Goodbye.